Hi everyone, this is part two of a three-part video series that I'm doing on climate change. Part one, there'll be a link up there appearing like magic. That dealt with the problems that we face going forward if we don't actually tackle the problem in the coming 4 or 5 years, and the catastrophes that are going to happen. It's going to be huge. So if you haven't seen it yet, please take a look at it. This video is going to be more about how the system is rigged against any change actually happening. And the system is rigged against us by two separate entities, basically not just bribing the government, but also changing the public's minds as well. So, first of all, we need to know just how big the fossil fuel industry is. It's the biggest industry on the planet by a long, long way. The fossil fuel industry is huge. There are 1,469 oil and gas firms listed on the stock exchanges around the world, worth a combined $4.65 trillion. ExxonMobil, which is worth around $425 billion, is the second largest company in the world. Only Apple is bigger than it. 7 of the 10 largest companies in the world are within the oil and gas industry. That's how massive it is. It is gigantic. It's hard to get your head around just how big it is. Now, we all know that they bribe the governments. We know that they do this. But to what extent they bribe the governments, not many people actually realise. And I've done some investigating, and what I found is absolutely, it's mind-blowing, it's remarkable. So in the 2016 election cycle alone, if you look at their total contributions, the second one down is $100 million. That's how much the oil and gas industry spent bribing the politicians just in America. That's just America. $100 million in the 2016 election cycle. If you go down there, you can see 80 million in 2012. 40 million in 2008, 27 million in 2004. So every general election, the money that they're using to bribe the politicians to get policies that help their already overblown industry is increasing every single election cycle. It's getting worse. So you can see here, this graphic, the contribution trends, that will show you just how much they are every election cycle, every midterm, every election. You can see how it's going up. Already in the 2018 election cycle, they're almost $30 million already. And we've still got another, 9 or 10 months to go until the midterms. So it's getting worse. Now, who are the biggest direct contributors to this government bribery? Well, not unsurprisingly, number one in America, direct-wise, is the coke industries. You can see there, $4.8 million, Chevron Group second, Endeavor, ExxonMobil down there in sixth. But that doesn't tell the whole story. The big players are from the lobbyists. And you can see there, ExxonMobil, 11.39 million, Coke Industries, 9.5 million, Chevron Group, 9.2 million. The numbers are astounding once you actually look at it. They are huge. Who are the top recipients though? Well, unsurprisingly, you will see there Paul Ryan, who's everybody's favourite Republican House politician. He's got 464,000 in direct contributions. John Barrasso, who I actually hadn't heard of until I looked at this. But down there you can see there's a Democrat. And you can see there by that graph at the top, the Democrats don't get nearly as much as the politicians. So unsurprisingly, this is why Republican politicians say that climate change isn't real. They're bought by the government. Now, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but it's unusual to see a Democrat on that list. So why is she on there? Well, the key is in the ND next to her name, which is North Dakota, which is where the Bakken Shale oil fields are, which is the start of the Dakota Access Pipeline, which goes all the way from there all the way down to somewhere and then down to Texas. It's unsurprising that she would get that money from the oil and gas industry with such a large industry in North Dakota. I feel sorry for the people in Standing Rock, but hey, we can blame some of it on Heidi Heitkamp. Now, the top recipients in 2016, if we have a look at that list, this is telling because number one, they're Ted Cruz. We all know his stance on global climate change. Number two, Donald Trump. Oh, that's understandable. It's nearly $1 million in direct contributions. And then number three, Hillary Clinton. Looking at that, is it any wonder whatsoever she was so pro-fracking? When everybody knows you frack anywhere, you're going to get earthquakes. But she's pro-fracking, and that's why $900,000 in direct contributions in 2016. Marco Rubio there, Paul Ryan again, Lisa Murkowski, Jeb Bush, all the major players are on there. Now it's interesting to actually look at how much the fossil fuel industries get back, because although they might be buying the government with that, as I said in the last video, they're actually investing in it because they get the money back in bucket loads through subsidies and kickbacks and contracts and all that sort of thing. Now, the fossil fuel subsidies globally are a staggering $5 trillion a year. $5 trillion going to the industry which is driving climate change and keeping the price down low, when we know we have the technology to actually go in a different route. And already, as I pointed to in the last video, solar and wind power is cheaper than coal in the US. Okay, but what is a fossil fuel subsidy? Let's nail this down. A fossil fuel subsidy is any government action that lowers the cost of fossil fuel energy production, raises the price received by energy producers, or lowers the price paid by energy consumers. Essentially, it's anything that rigs the game in favour of the fossil fuels compared to other alternative energy sources, such as hydropower or geothermal or wind or solar. So the money that is going to the fossil fuel companies could go elsewhere. It could go to green energy. There's no reason why it should go to the fossil fuel industries. It's the biggest industry already in the world. They've got enough money. They don't need more. The investment needs to be given in subsidies to renewable energy sources. That's where it should be going, but it's not. The most obvious subsidies are direct funding and tax giveaways, but there are many activities that count as it. Loans and guarantees at favourable rates, price controls, governments providing resources like land and water to fossil fuel companies at below market rates, research and development funding, yada, 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 yada. There are many ways that they get these kickbacks from the government for their $100 million investment. But how much in America do they get back? That's a good question. So they're investing 100 million last year. How much do they get back? Well, as of October 2017, Oil Change International estimates the United States fossil fuel exploration and production subsidies are at $20.5 billion a year. So to put that into context, for every $100, according to these statistics, for every $100 the US government politicians get from the oil and gas industry, they give back to them $20,500 in subsidies. So for a $100 investment for the fossil fuel industries like the Koch brothers and the Koch industries and ExxonMobil, they get back $20,500. That doesn't tell the whole story though, because that is just one report. Other credible estimates of annual United States fossil fuel subsidies range from $10 billion, so it could be only $10,000 they get back per $100 investment, to $52 billion. So it could be $52,000 that they get back in subsidies from that $100 investment. Just try and get your head around that. This is bribery, plain and simple. Yet none of these costs, none of these costs that I've just said to you, so it's anywhere from $10,000 they're getting per $100 investment to $52,000. None of them cover, excuse me, I thought I was going to sneeze then. None of these costs borne by taxpayers related to the climate, local environmental and health impacts, So there's obviously more it's going to cost the general public as well, because obviously anything to do with the climate and cooling down and that sort of thing, it's going to cost them even more money, you and I. Fossil fuel subsidies in the United States also include massive military expenditures to acquire and defend fossil fuel industries around the globe, and infrastructure spending and related maintenance based on antiquated energy system built on large remote power plants and cheap electricity. So not only are these subsidies going back to the companies who are bribing the government, but then the subsidies they get, they're not actually being used within the borders of the United States. They're going off to other countries in the Middle East to build fossil fuel factories and energy plants and power plants and that sort of thing to defend or to supply the many military bases of the US that have got the 1,000 military bases that we know of. In 2017, the Trump administration introduced its energy dominance agenda, largely predicated on speeding up oil, gas, and coal production through deregulation and dismantling of existing environmental and human health and safety rules. With a cabinet stacked with climate deniers and fossil fuel enthusiasts, the nation may likely be headed down a path of even greater handouts to oil and gas and coal industries. So the way it's going, we've got Trump for the next 3 years. He's deregulated, so even more money is going to go in subsidies to these oil and gas companies, which means there was a report that the Koch brothers were going to spend $4 billion or 400 million or something like that, lobbying the government for the midterms. It's no wonder that they're spending that amount of money if they're getting such high returns back. This is the way they rig the games. But it's not just America. America's just one. If we come to the UK, this was in the Independent last year. Fossil fuel firms' multi-billion pound state subsidies revealed in accidentally leaked secret files. There was some files that ended up in the hands of some reporters which showed fossil fuel firms have been given billions of pounds in financial support for their work overseas by the government. Some $6.9 billion billion pounds in research, in support was provided to the oil, gas and coal companies under the export scheme since 2000, according to an analysis of the files by Greenpeace in the magazine. Most of that, though, £4.8 billion, was committed since 2010. That was when the Conservatives came into power in the coalition with the Liberal Democrats. Green energy products, so renewables, on the other hand, in that time, got just 39 million in support since 2012. So since 2010, we'll be generous and say since 2010 it's been less than 50 million that they got in subsidies. Meanwhile, 4,800 million went to the oil and gas. So you can see how it's rigged. The whole system is rigged. Now, what happens when you actually stand up to these politicians? You say this is not fair. You stand up to them, you go and you say, right, okay, we've got to talk about this. Well, this is what happens. Activist ejected from meeting with lawmaker after asking how much money he's getting from the Koch brothers. He just asked a question. That's it. How much money are you getting from the Koch brothers? Out. No, out. We're not having any truth here. No. This was only February. This is this week, February the 23rd, 21st. So you can't even ask a question in America about it. You can't even say, well, how much are you getting from the Koch brothers? Amazing, isn't it? It's not just oil and gas, obviously. We know Donald Trump is very pro-coal, or clean coal as he calls it. Clean coal, by the way, is a contradiction in terms. It's just a made-up name. It's terrible for the environment, it really is. And you can see there, 2016 election, 13.5 million. It's not on a par with the oil and gas industry, but they do a lot of lobbying as well in the coal industry. And they've got their way. You can see their coal mining long-term contribution is going up. 2012 was actually larger than 2016, which surprised me quite a bit. And the top recipients, as I mentioned, Donald Trump, number one, and then you've got the usual the usual suspects: Ted Cruz, Pat Toomey, Marco Rubio, or little Marco Rubio, Paul Ryan, Lisa Murkowski. It's the same people over and over and over again. And then, when Trump comes into power, this happens. The giant tax cuts that he gave. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. And this is why people knew Trump was a disaster. People knew, especially scientists, were like, "Oh my God, if he gets in, it's going to be huge." But then again, people didn't really have much of a choice in that. The other option really on the ballot was Hillary Clinton. This is what you get, Democrats, when you rig your primaries. In that article, it says oilmen, wildcatters, and particularly refiners are reaping billions in gains from President Donald Trump's tax overhaul, helping boost the staying power of old-style energy, even as the world searches for cleaner fuels. The tax adjustments come as crude prices have rallied 54% since June. Together with the price rise and the new tax code have supercharged the oil industry in ways that could test the resolve of money managers who vowed to divest from companies that have powered the world's economic engines for 2 seconds. So this is actually dissuading people from investing in green energy. And then it's just hiked the price, the tariffs up on the solar panels. It's rigging the game. It's tilting the table. It's as simple as that. This should be story number one on every news channel, everywhere. Fossil fuel friendly tax plan spares oil, not solar or Tesla. There are exceptions. Some of the rules that Trump put in place did actually benefit, but it was a very, very small amount, benefit the renewable energy sector. But there are a few exceptions. The 7,500 credit for electrical vehicle purchases, that was scrapped, as is a credit for big solar and geothermal projects. Those changes, alongside other tweaks, may make it harder for renewables to attract financing. I disagree with one word in that quote from that article. May. I would change may to will definitely, because that's really what it is. So it should be the number one story everywhere. I think the people watching this, having seen all that information, especially having seen the first video, it should be number one on everybody's lips. The media should be talking about this constantly instead of talking about Russian Twitter bots. This article from the New York Times, though, was from 2012. It's not Donald Trump. He's not the only one. This has been going on for a long, long time. As people have said, all Donald Trump has done is just put an ugly face on an administration that had been doing the same things over and over again for the last three decades. That's all he's done. This has been happening constantly, all the way back to Reagan. In that article in the New York Times, it says, with nearly 2 months before Election Day on November the 6th, estimated spending on television ads promoting coal and more oil and gas drilling or criticizing clean energy has exceeded $153 million, according to an analysis by the NYT of 134 advertisements on energy issues broadcast this year by the presidential campaigns, political parties, energy companies, trade associations, and third-party spenders. Now, that was 2012. So you can imagine it's got a hell of a lot more in 2016. These things always go up. This from the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post, by the way, is actually quite a good publication. Just avoid the opinion section. The journalism there is actually quite good. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's not as bad as a lot of people say online. That's just an aside anyway. So big oil ads beat out climate news on CNN. All right, I wonder how that happens. During 1 week in January, this is when was this? This was last year, I think, wasn't it? No, 2016 this was, so this was the year during the election. During 1 week in January, just after NASA announced that 2015 was the hottest year on record, CNN viewers saw over 10 times more advertising from the oil and gas industry than reporting about the world's climate, according to a new study from the non-profit Media Matters. While the cable news network devoted less than a minute to stories about the warming planet that week, it sold over 13 minutes of airtime to the American Petroleum Institute, the country's largest oil and gas trade group. So 1 minute and a whole week of 24/7 broadcasting on CNN in 2016, there was 1 minute about climate change. But just in the advertisements, there was 13 minutes that were pro-fossil fuels. It says something when the advertisements on a news channel, a so-called news channel I might add, in America, outweigh the news by 13 times. You may remember, CNN aren't the only ones, you might remember this guy. This was during Hurricane Harvey last year. His name is Shihab Ratansi. Now, obviously MSNBC and CNN, they don't have their own reporters in the field. They don't need them because they just get, if they need anything on foreign policy, they will just get a memo from the Pentagon, or they'll get somebody on who's paid by the military-industrial complex. That's basically what they do. They don't need reporters in the field. But whenever something like this happens, like Hurricane Harvey, they actually outsource and go to reporters from other stations that actually do reporting. So in this case, the guy was from Al Jazeera. Now, if you haven't seen this yet, you're going to be mad as hell, because this is what happens when a reporter comes on MSNBC or CNN and tries to tell the truth about the oil and gas industry.
Joining us live on the ground in Beaumont, the first camera to get there is my old friend Shihab Ratansi, Al Jazeera English reporter. His hotel is surrounded by water. He cannot get out of it, but he's got a shot. Shihab, what's the situation as you've seen it?
We're surrounded, as you said, as so many people are in Beaumont. We can take a look. I mean, we're in an island of calm, an oasis of dryness relative. But already this water is beginning to come up over here. This is I-10 behind us. Sections of this are now closed. Down there is Louisiana. We know sections. Jeff, you want to go this way? Down there is Louisiana. That's the road we took to get here. The whole section moving to Louisiana is now shut, we understand. It's interesting listening to the mayor, though, just then, because we were listening to the mayor as well last night. If you were a resident in Beaumont last night and you were watching local television, you would have been reassured by what the mayor said, by what the weather forecaster said. This wasn't going to be as bad as this. I remember the mayor talking about all the investment they've done in drainage for roads and things like that. It's pretty clear something has gone wrong here with the forecasting and with the preparation. Clearly the roads are now waterlogged. We understand 500 roads just in the southeast region are flooded. Actually, let me put this in context. I know you were talking to someone in Port Arthur a moment ago. We're in what's called the Golden Triangle in the southeast. So we have Orange is one point of that triangle to the north. We're in Beaumont, and then we have Port Arthur to the south. Now, you know, it's interesting. The reason why it's called the Golden Triangle is because this is the first place in the United States where they discovered large quantities of oil in 1901. And that led to the Texas oil boom and the huge amounts of money pouring into this region. It's pretty clear, though, that despite that, money has not been flowing into this region for the infrastructure, for the climate change effects that we knew were inevitable because of the oil and gas industry's activities on this coastline, even as those oil and gas industries were covering up what they knew about climate change in the 70s. I have to go on about this. Ali, you're an Al Jazeera guy. We get to the point on Al Jazeera. So that is very striking for us here. So much money has been made on this region, and it hasn't gone into the infrastructure to deal with the climate change that was inevitable because of the industry.
Hold that thought for 1 second, because on the screen we've got a live helicopter.
There you go. Just cut him off. We'll come back to you. We'll come back to you. I'll give you one guess as to whether they went back to that guy for his report, him to finish his report. You'll only need one guess. I doubt very much whether he's been seen anywhere near MSNBC or CNN since then. The game is rigged. The government is being bought, and not only are the government bought to actually give the fossil fuel industry even more money and more power that they just do not need, but the news is being bought as well. The same with Raytheon and Boeing and Halliburton, running advertisements on these news networks. When big oil buys airtime on these news networks in the form of advertisements, or big pharma, they're not buying a rhetoric, they're buying a silence. So CNN and MSNBC aren't lying about this, they're just not covering it. And whenever, for instance, I've touched on this in previous video, whenever CNN have on somebody who knows what they're talking about with climate science, on the other side of the screen they'll have a Republican who is bought by the Koch brothers or bought by ExxonMobil. They won't declare that, which is against journalistic practices. They won't declare that at all. Anderson Cooper won't say, well, do you have this position because you got 464,000 last year from the Coke Industries in direct contributions, Speaker Ryan? They won't say that. If I had the chance to interview him, or you did, I'm damn sure you'd be bringing that up. But CNN and MSNBC don't. The game is rigged. However, there is something we can do about it, and that will be in the third and final part of this video series. Thanks very much for watching. I've really enjoyed doing this. Please subscribe, please hit the bell so when I do drop future videos you get a notification of it. Please hit the thumbs up as well, because that really helps the stream out. And support me on Patreon if you can. There's Russiagate, the Establishment Lie is free for patrons, and also any more material that I do, whether it's in the public or whether it's paid for, the patrons will get that for free. So thanks very much for watching, and until next time, take care and peace.